The crime wave is not going to wait for the legislature to come back. They need to be back to address the hellish life that many families are experiencing. The irony here is that the very black lives that was the justification for many of the failed legislation that had been passed here in Albany County are the very black lives most impacted by the violence. It's failing our youth miserably, it's failing our community miserably, but it's not working because what we continue to see are the same young people who are being apprehended for engaging in very violent acts back out on the street and continuing to engage in the same behavior. That's how we know it's not working. And furthermore, the information that we have, the volume of cases that we have, and the numbers. Most of the crimes that are taking place in our communities are occurring within same blocks and same neighborhoods. In the past, if there was a 16-year-old young man carrying a loaded firearm, that young man would be prosecuted in adult part and incapacitated from that community. That young person would not be returning to that community and continuing to pose harm. That is a remarkable failure of public safety policy. That remarkable failure is when people who usually wouldn't carry loaded firearms begin to carry loaded firearms because they don't trust anyone to protect them. And so when young people are losing faith in the system, I think we have to stand up and pay attention. We will appear in family court. As a matter of fact, we have now a routine practice of appearing in family court when we continue to see young people with loaded firearms. Let me give you an example. End of 2021, 2 young people apprehended in a car that had been speeding with no lights on. What they came upon was one young man in the front seat and another young man in the back seat. Now, 2 people in a vehicle generally don't travel that way. They tend to sit in the passenger seat to accompany the driver. But in this case, 2 of those young people had 2 ghost guns in the back. They were apprehended. We attempted to keep those cases in youth part and prosecute those cases. We failed to meet our burden, the new burden that's been imposed on us by Raise the Age. Because no one could testify that they saw the 2 young men brandishing or displaying the weapon, that case was kept in family court. Several weeks ago, one of those young men was again apprehended, this time with an AR-15 gun, a ghost gun. And so whatever family court was doing to address the issues that was presented the first time they were apprehended with 2 ghost gun weapons failed miserably because one of them is back with a new case. And we are currently in the process of trying to make that argument that there are extreme or extraordinary circumstances here that should preclude family court from taking that case and allowing us to prosecute that case. It is absolutely having a negative and disproportionate impact in the black community because the kids that you were referring to at Albany High, these are the same young people who are living in those communities where those that are causing a clear and present danger today continue to roam about. And therefore, when someone comes along and says, okay, well, we have a great idea, and begins to change the entire criminal justice practice so that a certain population of violent young people are not held accountable, you are thereby changing the dynamics that exist in a community. What you can do is you can provide, the legislature should in fact immediately author a provision that allows for the people to appeal the decisions that are being made in family court. And by the way, The judges are also hamstrung there, and it's just because of poor drafting. A young person apprehended within 18 months 3 times with a loaded firearm. You would think that was an extraordinary circumstance, but that's not an extraordinary circumstance here in New York. So on the one hand, you have leadership that's saying they're doing everything possible to help stem the wave of crime and violence. And yet, these are the laws that we're left with. It's incumbent upon us to improve the criminal justice system. We should always make sure that we leave it in a better state than how we had found it, but this just is not the way. Criminal justice policy should be pragmatic. You can't just simply wave a wand and hope for things to happen, and I believe that that's exactly what's transpired in the last several sessions. They've been drafting legislation for the world that they want to live in as opposed to the world that we're currently living in.